talk about is for you to say, after you've asked your questions, or maybe you don't, I explain, you go, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's what I'm looking for. All you have to say is, oh, that makes sense. What you do with it's your business, but that you'll go, okay, I get that. Okay, and it is explainable that way. There's not going to be a whole lot of mystery in what I talk about. It's kind of logical. It flows. It makes sense. That type of thing. Okay, so that was my first page covering. All right, you'll get it. How's that 1 cent for covering a whole page? All right. Cool. All right. So you got to start with this. Well, you're supposed to start with the scriptures, and which we're not going to do because that's just boring. Okay, because when you talk about how can you trust the New Testament letters, because that's where we hear about who God is and who Jesus is, and everything. The big picture is in those letters from the Old Testament and the New Testament. And a lot of people will say, well, how can you trust those documents that were written 2,000 years ago? Or people will say, well, who wrote those documents? Who's the guy who wrote them? And then you have to unpack that. No, not one guy wrote them. It's like a library of collection of letters and things like that. And then you got to get into the historical accuracy and how verifiable are those. And that's a lot of technical stuff, and it's just boring. But if you want to do that, I'm not going to do it with you. You can go online. You can go online and just read how reliable are the letters, the New Testament letters, the Old Testament letters. Have fun, okay? But you will find out that it's all amazingly accurate, historically ridiculously accurate compared to everything else of antiquity, of the letters that we have. So what we're talking about what I'm talking about is going to be coming from that information that is historically probably the most accurate of any writings of history. I'll give you an example of, let's take Aristotle. We study Aristotle, right? Of course he existed. I think the earliest documents that we have of the writings of Aristotle are like 1,000 years after he lived. And there's like, I'm going to exaggerate, there's like 300 copies or something like that, okay? Like 500 to 1,000 years after he lived. And they get these things and they go, well, of course he lived, okay? When you come to the Bible, okay, the New Testament alone, you've got within 25 years of Jesus' life, and you've got like 10,000 documents. You get the idea, okay? It's incredibly accurate, okay, and historically close and verifiable, and on and on. Okay, enough of that. Okay, so I'm going to start now. So we don't even need the Bible to answer this one. There is a God. We all assume that. You assume that? Okay. All right. There is a God. Okay.
We know that. Yeah.
We can do the apologetic of that, but we'll assume that you believe there's a God, a rational being that relates to us, and we can relate to Him. Okay. And He's the creator of everything. That's our foundational starting point. All right. Why did God make us? Okay. Why did God make us? All right. Now listen. Did He have to? Was someone putting a gun at God's head and saying, "Make man"? Well, no. Okay. If someone made God make us, then that person would be God. Right? All right. So no one forced God to make us. All right. Why did He make us? Well, He didn't have to. He wanted to. Why did He want to? He was, I don't know, bored one day? Maybe. Okay. Was he lonely? Well, I mean, it talks about at the very beginning of the Old Testament when Moses is writing, and Moses is saying, I had a pretty close relationship with God. And he writes, and God said, let us make man in our own image. Plural. Let us make man. Well, who's us? There ain't no one else around but God. Yet God says there. So there's somehow, now this is the one mystery we can never unpack. How can there be plurality in God? And we find out as it unfolds through history, there's three parts to God. There's God the Father, you could say God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. We are not unpacking that in this study. There's books, tons of books written on all this stuff. All right. we're just going to say that God was plural from the beginning. So if there's plurality of relationship, then he probably wasn't lonely. All right? Then why would he make us? Why would he make us? Well, it says, God says, well, let us make man in our own image. In our own image. All right? So what does that mean? Let us make man in our own image. Well, so we're supposed to be reflecting of God. So God is relational, right? God is relational. In fact, let me now get to my notes. I want to make sure I get on my point. God is relational. It appears to be within the Godhead, if you want to use that term, within that relationship. There seems to be love and commitment. Obviously, God doesn't hate himself. You don't hear, unlike the Roman gods or the Greek gods, there's not wars going on in heaven between God and God. Okay, there seems to be a oneness, a plurality of love and relationship. And also, then we have Jesus, okay, who pops up later on in the New Testament, we understand. But he says, look at me, I'm God. If you want to see God the Father, look at me. Okay? And we'll unpack that later on. So if you accept that point right now, then you can say, well, then God is, how can I say this? Then to be, because Jesus says, be like me. So to be like Jesus is to be like God. All right? So again, the whole thing is basically love and relationship. Everything about God is about love and relationships. All right? So now let's stop for a second and say, okay, so why did God make us? Did he have to? No. But he made something like unto himself. He said, let us make man in our own image. Okay. Let's stop for a second and go to human relationships. We have a clue by how he made us. You know, whenever an artist does a painting, there's always, you see the artist in the painting. For example, Picasso. You can line up a whole bunch of paintings, you know, and if you're an art expert, you can go, Picasso, you know, Rembrandt, you know, there's a certain style, there's certain things, who they are come out in their you know, writers, whatever it is, anything you do will come out in everything else that you do. That's your personality, you can't help it, okay. So God comes out, you should say, in his creation. So this creation reflects who God is to a certain extent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I use the example of LeBron James. You know, when I wrote this thing, I didn't know his son played basketball, okay? Mm-hmm. But the little Bronny, they call him, right? Yeah. Anyway, so LeBron James has a son. And I'll bet you, if you didn't know who he was, but you knew that LeBron James' son is on this team, okay? And you watch that team play and you go, which one would be, you could pick him out. Because he would be like, there'd be something about him, his mannerisms, his movements, his athletics. There were so many things that you would go, oh, that's LeBron's son. Look how he did that kind of thing. You couldn't help it. Okay. But the reflection goes both ways. You know, if a son is like the father, well, then the father's like the son. So it goes both ways to a certain extent. Okay. Okay. So, so God made us. Okay. Why? He didn't have to. He wasn't bored. He appears he wanted to make something like himself. So now let's get to us. Why did Scott and Barb have children? All right, Scott and Barb. That's me, my wife Barb. If it's being taped right now, am I on video? Mm-hmm. You're great. All right, good looking guy. Well, right. Uh-huh. Okay, so why did Scott and Barb choose to have a daughter? All right. We loved each other. We were committed, had a great love relationship, didn't need to have a daughter, right? We didn't live on a farm where we need to have kids to work the land, you know, and have 10 kids because 5 would die. So really, we didn't need to have a daughter. I would say we had a dog, but I don't like dogs necessarily for pets, but a lot of people will have dogs, pets, right? So we love each other, and everything is there. It's complete. The commitment to each other is there. And so, when there's a certain amount of freedom we have to express ourselves in that way. It's a certain amount of freedom. But then we decide to have a child. Okay? We already got a dog. Why didn't we stop at the dog? All right, you've seen dogs, pet dogs. I mean, really, I use the joke, right? If I was God and I was making the creation, making the animals, when I got to dogs, I'd have stopped. I just said, look at these little guys. These are great. You know, they just wag their tail. All you want to do is just love you and be with you. They're fantastic, right? And yet he moves on. He moves on. Okay, so he makes up. Okay, so we have Barb and I. We have a dog. That's not enough. Why? Why isn't it enough to have a dog? Why would I want to make another baby other than to propagate, the human race? I don't think that. Before I have sex with my wife, I'm not thinking we need to propagate the human race today. I don't think that. Okay, it's that time of month when if we have sex, we're going to have a baby. I don't sit there and go, we've got to do it because we've got to keep the human race going. We don't think that. Okay, so why do we choose to have a child?
To I would say kind of further your relationship.
What do you mean by that?
As in, you guys are both creating a person that's half for you, half for her. And, I mean, it's almost similar to boredom, as in meaning, you and her can only go so far, just you and her and the dog,
Okay.
compared to that child that has on that extra layer. So it's close to boredom. Because that's one thing that's just been in my head a lot. Was like, was God bored? Why is everybody so against people saying that? But I don't think it was boredom, but it's to add another layer, like,
okay,
as you said, like relational. It's like,
all right, you're in.
Okay,
okay, you can stop right there. You got it. Okay, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I already know the answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Only because you said it before.
Yeah, we've already done this. Okay.
Yeah.
It's because number one, Scott and Barb have big hearts. We have a lot of love in us. Okay. We love the dog, but it's not the same as another person. We can only relate to a dog so much. The dog can't talk back to me. Yeah, it can't. It can't. Okay, so it's limited. It's loving is limited. But another human, like you said, like unto ourselves. We are very much like God. Think about that. We come together and we create. We create a new being that never existed before. Sound familiar? Yeah. Coming out of a relationship. Sound familiar? God has a relationship. Another being comes out of that. That's what we do. Something never existed before now exists. A full human being with conscious self-awareness, rational, on and on and on. So the point is, we wanted someone else to love. We have big hearts. We love each other. We together want to love something like unto ourselves, another human being. We could adopt. Actually, we did adopt. Okay? And it's the same thing, by the way. If you're ever thinking of adopting a kid, have no fear. Adopting is the same as having. I can speak from experience. No difference at all. Okay? So we choose to have this child because we want to love this child. And why do we do this? We don't need to, remember, don't live on a farm. Why do we want to do that? It's for our own good pleasure. Right? The child didn't say, make me. There's nothing from the womb going, whoa, we gotta make the baby. No, we choose to make the child because we have big hearts. All right. And so we make this another little human being. Now this is a crazy question. This makes no sense. If Jeremiah was from another planet and he landed on this earth and he saw Scott and Barb doting, just really doting over this little thing, he would say, what are you doing? What value does that thing bring to your lives? Nothing. He brings nothing to the table, the little girl. All that thing does is sleep, poop, and cry, and eat. What are you doing spending so much time with it? It brings nothing to you. Right? And we would look at Jeremiah like, you have no idea. Okay? Yet we would die for that little thing that brings no value to us. No, what do you call it? Practical? Is that the word we're looking for?
No practical value, yeah.
Yeah, intrinsic, practical value brings nothing. And yet, our hearts have gone out to that thing. And that little girl, not even a thing, that little girl, and we give a name to her. Right? We name them right at the very beginning. It has no personality. I have no idea. Most people name based upon, names mean something, right? This thing is just pooping and crying. And it's just a little thing. Yeah, we name it right off. Okay, we give it we see it. When you name something, you see it, right? That's why we have names. That's why in the Bible, when Jesus tells a parable of the rich man and Lazarus, it's interesting. In the world, whose names are remembered? Rich people, poor people. No one remembers poor people's name. And yet, when Jesus tells a parable about he says, "Oh, there's this rich man, and Lazarus was a poor man." See, Jesus reverses it. Doesn't give the rich man a name. So anyway, okay. So we have this baby, and life rocks on. All right. And after a while, we're having a great time, and then Jeremiah comes to earth again, and he sees Barbara and I, and he says, "Now wait a minute. Why did you have this being? You guys were free." Just the two of you, you could come and go as you wanted. You loved each other. You had your dog. Everything with life was great. Why did you restrict? Why did you have this other little being that's taking all your time and energy and your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions? Why did you do that? Right? That makes no sense. And this thing giving nothing back to you. It's take. Okay? And we go, well, you don't understand. So he leaves. Boom. A couple years later, he rolls back to earth again. Sees us and he goes, "My God, you had another one?" Now when you were really restricted, your freedom got so restricted, and now it's ridiculously restricted. You got 2 kids, right? Okay, so why did we had one? We got the dog, but now the dog's already knows it's second place now. Okay, we got the baby, and then we choose to have another one. Why do we choose to have another one? Why do we choose to have another child? We already got one. I love her to death. Oh, I just love that little baby girl, all my heart. And then we choose to have another. Why? Don't think deep thoughts. Remember, in my study, no deep thoughts. Don't think deep thoughts.
To do it again.
Give why. Why would we choose to have? Because you're going to be married someday. You're going to have a kid. You're going to just stop at one? Probably not. Unless it's an accident, but probably not. Why would you choose to have another one?
To grow the family.
Ah, okay. You know why you have another one? Because you have a big heart. Here we go again. You have a big heart. You just love this little thing to death, and you go, let's have another one. Okay? Well, for 2 reasons. Our hearts are big. A lot of love in our hearts. We want to love this little girl, and we want to have another maybe a little boy or another little sister. Okay? And there's 2 reasons. Number 1, it's for us, because we want that little girl. I'll call her Jessica, which happens to be our daughter's name. Okay, Jessica. Why do we have her to begin with? First, let's go back to the first child. Why do we have her? So that we would, like a turtle, have birth, and then walk away. Good luck to the child. Well, we're moving on now. No, we nurture, we sustain, we grow her up. All right. So we're wanting a relationship with this little. I know this is silly, but I'm really talking about God right now. If you haven't figured that out, okay. So why do we? Because we want to sustain a relationship. We want to love that little girl, and we want her to love us back. Right? That's the purpose. We don't have. No parent has a child that says, "God, I hope Jeremiah, my boy, grows up to hate us. I just hope he grows up to hate me and leave me alone. I'll raise him till he's 18, and that was fun and cool. But God, I can't. No. Okay. We choose to have a child, so that child will love us. We will love him. We will have a relationship. Right. That's what we want. Okay. Why have another one? Again, big heart, but we want. There are 2 reasons. Another one is to have another child to love us. But also that Jessica would have a sister or a brother, right? That she would not be lonely or be alone, and it would help her. Obviously, it helps her grow and mature as it would the other child. But that's a secondary issue. You don't have a child. You don't have a second child just to help your first one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you're talking, like there's that aspect of like, you have the first child because with the whole analogy of like the alien comes to Earth and he sees, Scott and Barb, you guys love each other, that's great. But you want something, and you have the dog, and you love the dog.
Yeah.
You can love a dog. I loved my dog growing up as a kid.
Yes.
Like, that's a real feeling.
Oh, yeah, people get depressed when they're, yeah, of course.
Love the dog, but it's a different species. It's different than us. And so with the God analogy, made in our own image,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you think about a married couple, they love each other so much. Why would they want to have a child? They want to love something that is them.
Exactly.
It embodies their love into a single being.
That's a better
It's
way.
a
That's better than
tangible,
how I said it. Yeah.
physical thing that you can actually love. Like me and Leslie, we love each other, and that is a separate love because I love her, she loves me, but the child brings me and her into one.
Oh, that's
And
good.
It is a
Ooh.
love that we see, you know, there's always that little bit of selfishness. Like I love myself, but I also love Leslie. And so that child is that.
Yeah.
It is a real thing that you can pick up, you can hold. That is our love right there.
That's good.
That's what the child is. And so
Wow.
when you love something like that, you want the same reason we want to have a child in the first place. You want that child to experience something that they can love and something that they can relate to. Because as a parent, you know, you are separated because you are not a child. And so you have the second one, so the child isn't lonely in that aspect.
Yep.
And that's kind of where you get in with God. Like he made Adam, but saw that Adam was alone.
Yeah.
So he makes Eve. And so now they are together
Okay.
and they have something to relate to.
Okay. Now on the camera, people on the camera land, ignore that man. Okay. Because he just gave a better answer than I had, and I don't want that guy making me look bad in my
no,
class.
for the
Just
camera
kidding.
land, let me know. My answer actually came from Scott. He said exactly
No, but
what I
you
said, but
expressed
it
it-
was multiple years ago.
Yeah,
so
but you expressed it much better.
he's kind of old, so he forgets things.
Okay. Go ahead. Question.
Well, I was just
That
thinking
was a
of
great
another
answer.
type of love that the child gives, but the parent necessarily kind of doesn't have the chance to give the child. And I was thinking, like, when a parent gets of old age, you know, you kind of want your child. I mean, I guess at least part of the reason I would want a child too is for me to take care of, for them to take care of me in my old age.
And most of the time, you don't have the
So
child.
true.
I mean, maybe from Gate Street, you and your wife don't come together to have a child to take care of you when you get old.
Yeah.
If you lived on a farm where your everyday existence needed more farm hands and there was no one else, you have children and they're part of the life, and that probably, I'm guessing, factors into a certain extent.
Yeah.
But later on in life, you go, I hope my child takes care of me when I get old.
Yeah, your initial thought when you're
Yeah.
like I want to have a baby is not I want to have a baby because I need someone to take care of me in the future.
Yeah.
You like as you have the child and you're growing them up, that's what he was saying of like you hope that they love you.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
that love is like just how you cared for the child. The child has a same love for you to care for
Yeah.
you in situations.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah.
let me move on because I'm taking too much time on this, but this is a good foundation. That's fine. Okay, so the problem is you have another child so that your son or daughter will have a little brother and sister, all right? Again, why did you have the second one? You have the second one so that that child will love you, just like for you. What your goal is to have Jessica love Barb and have little Avery, my little boy Avery, okay, love us. Same thing. God, my boy, great sports football. He likes the Packers. Okay, great. Okay, and he will love his sister. So we got this triangle going: mom and dad, Avery, mom and dad, Jessica. You know, it's all flowing all this way.
Sounds
And the-
like a pentagram.
Yeah, and that whole thing is summed up in one word: family.
Mhm.
That's what God. And now let me just say right today from Gate Street, this is what God is after. That is the whole history, the reason for human existence. Everything with God is relational because He wants family. You can throw away, I say this before, you've heard me say this, you can throw away all the religions, you can throw away all the cathedrals, you can throw away all the religious books, you can throw all the doctorates, you can throw everything away. Strip it all down to one thing and one thing only. It is so simple. It's so hard to do, but it is so simple. God wants family. That's it. He wants us all loving each other and loving Him as Dad. How damn simple. And yet we can't do it. We won't do it. Because there's the other aspect which comes into it. Okay? We have a daughter, Jessica. I want her to love me. Okay? Well, here's how I'll make her love me. Because when you have a child, it seems they have free will. I mean, Barb and I have free will, right? We can choose to do things or not do things. So when I have a baby, my God, that little human being could be just like us. Oh no. She could have free will. She could make her own decisions in life. but I made her, we created her to love us. Damn, what if she doesn't? Okay? She's got the free choice in the matter. I know what I'll do. When she's about 3 or 4, when she becomes cognizant enough, self-aware enough to know what's going on, I'm going to take her in one day and sit her down and put a gun to her head and say, from now on, you will love me or you will die. That's what I'm going to do. That's how I guarantee her love. I'm going to put a gun to her head and say, love my boy Avery, love me or die. Okay? What's Avery going to say? Oh, Dad, I love you to death. I love you, love you, love you. Here, oh my gosh, I never want to leave your side. Okay? How would I ever know? Right? He might have loved me. You might, but I would never know because I forced it. Okay, this is a silly illustration, but you get the point.
Right.
In order for there to be genuine love, there has to be the freedom to choose. Otherwise, it's perfunctory. You would never know. Okay, so when we make children, when you make a child, you got a little strong-willed little girl, and we don't know where she's going, but hopefully that strong will be, what do we call it, will be captured, and so that she'll grow up as a strong woman, you know. But right now she's a little hellion, which is great for future, as long as mom can control that, right?
Yeah.
Bring that in, or dad, bring that in. But we have children which are strong-willed, and they want to do what they want to do, and we want them to love us, but we take the chance that they won't. You take that chance, and that can be okay. And so God takes the chance, and He makes us. All right, now we're back to God. So God makes man. It says in Ephesians, beginning, first chapter of the letter to the Ephesians, chapter 1, verse 5. God made man, it says, God made man for His own good pleasure. It literally says that. God made mankind for His own good pleasure. There it is, okay? Because He wants family. All right. So He gives us the free will, He says, and so He creates us, and He makes sex enjoyable. It's not just an instinct, it's an instinct, but it's really fun, it's really enjoyable, because He wants us to populate the earth. He said, God says, here, go out, be like rabbits. Really, populate the earth. Go out, okay, I want lots of kids. God's not like us. I want 2 kids. Well, maybe like Philip Rivers and the Chargers. He got 10 kids. Well, I don't know. He and his wife, they love lots of kids. They want lots of kids. All right. Well, think of God on Philip Rivers on steroids. That's God. I want lots of kids, and I all want them loving each other, and they're all going to be different personalities. It's going to be wonderful. Think about that. People have lots of different dogs. Oh, you know how people name their dogs, and little Lucy's this, and they know their dog's personalities. Well, we're probably like dogs to God. They're cute little guys. We're just cute little things to God. We're not really that difficult. I love that line. We're kind of simple little things to God. Okay, so that's His goal. But what we find is we choose not to love Him. Not only that, but we choose not to love each other. Those aren't extreme. I'm hyperbolizing, but generally the case as we look at the world, as soon as God makes mankind, people are selfish, self-centered, they don't get along, they hate each other. Eventually, these 2 boys of mine, I got Jeremiah and Avery, they grow up, they have their wives, their kids, their land, their flocks, their crops, they have their children, and as generations go on, bigger and bigger, they need more land, so you decide to move into that valley, you stay in this valley, okay, and then pretty soon, generation after generation, you forget you're even related, and the next thing you know, you've outgrown your land, so what are you going to do? There's no more room over here, there's good land over there, you're going to attack, you're going to try and take his land, and then you get wars going on, fighting and killing and all manner of things, and hell, it's kind of like the gangs in Harbor City and Wilmington down here they're all dang related. They're all from Mexico. They're all related. They're all cousins, but they hate each other and kill each other. Yeah. What is that? Okay, so that's an extreme example of what is happening on the earth. So God looks down and goes, what happened? What happened? I wanted family. And what have I got? It's a mess. I got the kids hating each other. And now they're not even recognizing me. They don't get along with each other, and they stop coming home. They stop referencing, it's just a mess. All right. So what is God to do? What does he do? I'll destroy them all. Well, he tried that at one point. Okay. It's just, I mean, it got so bad. We hear the Old Testament story, whether you believe it or not. The flood. You've heard this flood story, you know.
Yeah.
Noah's Ark.
Yeah, Noah's Ark. You know, God says. I mean, at one point it was so bad, it appears that he just goes, "I just got to end it all," except for this guy over here and his kids, and they seem to be. This is not, you know, little guy, little family over here that seem to be, you know, at least open to having a relationship with me. But the rest of them, it's just they're like animals. They're like just like animals. Yeah.
So, with that, was it only that one part of the world was flooded, and what about the rest?
Well, there's all kinds of evidence. It's conflicting. Some places, some scholars will say, you go down deep enough all over the world, there's always
There's cities.
a level of silt,
So,
yeah, clay and silt that all over that no one can account for. You know, certainly in the Mediterranean world, but it extends way out,
Mhm.
way out. So you just don't know. You know, whether the whole earth, we just don't know.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's one of the things we have to ask God when we get to heaven.
Because
and,
that was like the world at the time, so you know.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I was-
could have been
So
a
like,
And not
I-
many people.
I think the point of that was like, you know, sounds like morbid, but was to wipe out people. And so like, you know, we think of the world today as like the entire planet, but I think at that time, you know, what are we at, like 8 billion people on
What's it
Earth?
today? Now, back then there was probably less than a billion.
Yeah.
Maybe a few 100 million people on the
Yeah.
entire earth.
On the entire Earth. So that's like the state of California. And so like, does he need to flood the whole Earth? Maybe, but like the Earth was a completely different place back then. Like it's not as populated as now. So like that's how I've kind of always like
Yeah.
wrap my mind around it. But like I think the point really is of like it was kind of just a reset button.
Yeah.
He found one guy who still wanted to have a relationship with him, and then kind of just took care of everything. It's a crazy story. That's a whole nother
It's a
study
crazy story.
right there. Yeah.
And we just can't comment on that because we just don't know. You know, there's all kinds of archaeology. There's all kinds of theories. You know, this is another one of those things we just don't know. You know, what about the dinosaurs? There's certain things we just know. What's up with the dinosaurs? You know, why did God make the avocado pit so big? You know, I mean, there's just a lot of questions you want to go. Why did he? What's up with fleas?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Why do you make spiders?
spiders.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know that?
And flies.
They say no matter where you are in the world, you're never more than 6 feet away from a spider.
Don't like that.
Yeah, I read that. No matter where you are in the world, you're never more than 6 feet away from a spider. That's a scary thought.
Don't like
You know?
that.
Yeah, but anyway,
Definitely in here.
yeah, really,
Yeah, in here
Yeah.
for sure.
yeah. So, anyway, so here we go. So God, so it's a mess. The world's not at all what God wants. So what's He going to do? So He goes, okay, now I'm going to change the story a little bit. And again, this is my story. I'm playing fast and loose with my story. All right, with the husband and wife and kids. So Barb and I go, oh, we made all these kids and it's just bad. But you know what? We got one child at home. We got a little girl. Okay? Guess what her name is? Amelia. I got a little girl named Amelia. Okay? We got one little girl at home, hasn't left home yet. And we decide, you know what? Let's do this. Instead of spending all our time trying to woo, that's an old phrase for get back all the kids. It's not working. They're not loving us. They're not paying attention. Nothing's working. But Amelia's still at home. So let's do this. Let's focus on Amelia. She's still at home, has a great spirit, and let's pour all of our time and attention and really try to develop the best possible relationship we could have with her. Now, of course, my story breaks down because God was not different. I mean, you know what I mean? You can't say, well, what did you do with the other kids? Forget that. My story's adapting to the moment, all right? It's okay. So let's focus on Amelia. And we're going to put all of our time and attention into her. Why? Okay? The reason is we say if we can create enough of a wonderful relationship with Amelia, okay? She loves us, we love her, she gets all the blessings of mom and dad, of home, of love, of care, concern, that maybe Jeremiah will come swinging around one day, visit her or visit us something and go, wow, I just been watching how you and mom and dad relate. You know, I've missed it. You know, where I live, it's just so, hostile, it's so brutal. The life is brutal, and yet look at this love relationship you have going. I want that. I want that. That's the reason, right? We love her because we love her, absolutely. But we love her also because we love him and him. You got that?
Mhm.
That's what it's about.
But she gives obedience.
She's obedient. She's a wonderful. The daughter, we've put our time and energy. She's come back. We've done it right. And so there's this great relationship going on. And that's what God did with Abraham. All right. All the kids are going like hell over the world. So God goes, okay, I'm going to take one son. I'm going to find one guy who will listen to me and be, come into a relationship with me. He will be right with me, a righteous man. We will be right in our relationship. And so God takes Abraham, pours all his time and energy into him, and he says, through you, I am going to grow a nation that's going to be my people. I will be your God, and you will be my people. I will call them Ameliites. Okay? Okay. Instead of Israelites, I'll call them Ameliites, because that's we'll call them after our daughter Amelia. And so time rocks on, generations. And so Amelia goes out, gets a husband, and they procreate. It starts growing, the nation, and on and on and on. And then what you get out of that comes the Jews, or the nation of Israel. Now that was one of the questions on the test. Okay, you have the nation of Israel. Why the nation of Israel? Does God love the Jews more than any other tribe on the earth? No. Do Barb and I love Amelia more than Avery or Jeremiah? What parent loves what? Well, none of you guys have kids, okay? You ask any parent that's got 2 or 3. Now you gotta have more than 2. If you have 2 or 3 kids, ask a parent which one of your kids you love the most, and they look at you.
Favorites, though, right?
Maybe by what you do together, but most parents, if you said which of your kids you love the most, they would look at you like you're an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love my kids differently, but I love all my kids the same. I love all my kids the same. I love them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your mom. Does your mom love you or Jake better?
Me, for sure.
Oh, no, she loves both her sons, right?
Both
Okay,
of them.
all right. So anyway, so we have Amelia, okay, and she's growing up, and in the midst, as she's becoming a nation, you're already a nation. You're a big tribe. Let's stay with tribes, okay?
Yeah.
You're a tribes, okay? And she's becoming a tribe, all right? And the reason I picked Abraham and grow that nation up was for the sake of the world, for the sake of the other brothers and sisters, right? I mean, certainly for her sake, because we want with her what we want with you guys. But I don't get it with you guys, but I can get it with her. And so if we can get it with her, then maybe you'll see and you'll want to come home. Now I'm really simplifying Jewish history, but that's, and I've already checked a lot of New Testament scholars and different people in this whole thing, and I'm pretty accurate. I mean, everything I'm saying is general statements, okay? General things. Again, you can read the history of the Jews, and
you could get really deep into
any sentence I've said, you can go real deep.
Yeah,
but I'm not doing that.
The point of this is to simplify.
Yeah, simplify the whole, so you get the big picture. Okay, what's up with the Jews? Okay, so God picks the Jews, and the reason he picks them is for the sake of all the other brothers and sisters. So now I'm going to focus on Amelia. Okay, so here we go. So now Amelia, we're growing her up as a daughter, and she is. And we're having this relationship, and so she is growing up. The brothers and sisters of her grandchildren and stuff like that are growing and growing, and so at some point, when they're large enough, they're still very immature. Okay, I decide, or should say, Mom and I decide, it's time when she's. Like now, we'll switch back to a human family. Okay, all the kids, the older boys have gone. We still got a little girl at home. Okay, we got to help her grow up the right possible way. When she is 1 or 2 years old, do we give her rules and laws about the house? No. When she does something wrong, it's spank, cry, learn from pain. Right? Don't put your hand in the light socket. Bam, bam, bam. Don't do this. You spank. You don't reason with a 1-year-old. You're stupid if you do.
Yeah, you don't sit them down and be like, why do we not put our forks into the outlet? In the
Exactly.
wall?
Exactly. Or what? Or she reaches over and she little play day with her neighbor little girl, and she just grabs the doll or something like that. Spank. Whack. No, you don't do that. She's crying. She's learning fundamental things without any rules. It's just a trial and error. It's B.F. Skinner operant conditioning. That's what it is. It's just operant conditioning. All right. But at some point, as she gets older, she's going to start learning that there's something consistent about this stuff. Every time I take my little friend Susie's doll, I get a spanking. Okay? So what's going on? Well, at some point, we sit down with her, or maybe we, as we're going along, we start giving her rules and of how she's supposed to live. We start talking to her in moral terms, like, it's wrong to take your little friend's doll. It's wrong, and she probably doesn't understand that yet, but she's getting, as she's growing up, her little brain is starting to grow, and she understands. So she's becoming morally aware. It's the same thing with God, with the Jews. They're growing up. He's spanking them when they're doing things, punishing when they do certain things. But at some point, they reach a point where God says, okay, now it's time to give you some rules. We call those the Ten Commandments. Right? A nation is forming. People came out of slavery. All they were told their whole life was do this and don't do that. They didn't have a say in anything, just like a little 2-year-old or 3-year-old, 4-year-old. They don't have a say in anything, okay? And so at some point we say, okay, Amelia, it's time. And so I say, okay, if you take, now listen to me carefully, Amelia, the next time you take a doll, you try and take your neighbor's doll, you're going to get a spanking, and you're going to have to give her doll back, but we're now going to give her your doll. You're going to lose your doll permanently. And she does, you know what she hears? Blah, 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 blah. And then first time she does it, the doll is gone and all hell breaks loose, ah! But she gets the point. The next time, maybe it happens again, but pretty soon she figures it out. There's rules and laws, and there's consequences to your actions. That's the key. There's consequences to your actions. And so we give the rules and laws. That's the Ten Commandments. And so let me just stop for a second and say the history of the Jews, of the Jewish nation, the history of God with one particular people, is, if you look at their history, is literally growing them up from infancy to adulthood. In fact, I would venture to say, and if anyone is a New Testament, Old Testament scholar, I think I'm pretty accurate. It really is a growing up of people from primitive to sophistication, from primitive to adulthood, from childhood to adulthood, to where you're given laws and rules. And for example, if I told Amelia at 4 or 5, don't take your little friend's doll, or you're going to get a spanking and you're going to lose your doll. All right? That's wrong. But if she's 15 and she still is operating on that system, we got a problem, right? If she's 25, then we put the word prison into it, right? Prison. I mean, she doesn't. Yeah, you see where this is going, right? At some point, she's got to internalize and realize what was the purpose for the laws and rules. Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so the whole history of the Jews is God growing up a people, physically. I mean, literally, physically, morally, ethically, religiously, if you want to use that term, health, and what you eat, what you don't eat. It's amazing some of the things in the Old Testament God says don't eat, that centuries later we go, that was a smart move, like don't eat pig. Well, why you don't have the pig? Well, what happens if you eat undercooked pig, or you try to keep pig for very long, or pork for very long? Worms, right? I mean, there's sort of certain foods God says don't eat this, and don't eat this, and don't eat this, and there's all kinds of things, keeping them healthy, learning hygiene, learning all this kind of stuff. In every way, politically, socially, just everything. God is growing up a nation. Okay. But as they're growing up, there's hints along the way. God is saying through his people who are speaking on his behalf, he didn't leave them alone, the Jewish nation. He's always talking to them. And we're going to get to that in a little bit. He's always talking to them and saying, someone's coming. Your nation is going someplace. There's a reason why I picked you. For the sake of the world, you're supposed to be a light. Amelia, you're supposed to be the light to the world, to your brothers and sisters. You're supposed to be living in such a wonderful way that they're going to be in this darkness. They're going to go, look at that light, and they're going to get drawn to the light.
And you're talking about the prophets, right?
The prophets in there, but they're always calling the people back. But well, anyway, so what the Jews do, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, is they start taking these rules and laws legally. Again, they forgot it was a relationship, and they start thinking, oh, you know, here's the rules and here's the laws. And so God's going, no, you know. For example, the Ten Commandments. I think the word command isn't even there. You hear about the Ten Commandments, right? The one scholar said the word commandment should be interpreted weighty things, which is a little bit different. These are weighty things. These are important things. So it's different for me saying to Amelia, listen to me, you little snot, okay? Here's the rules. If you don't do them, boom, 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 as a taskmaster, as a punishment, you know what I mean? As opposed to, honey, here, look at these things. Do these things. These are really important things. These are going to really help your life. These are going to help you get on with life. See? Same things, but how I present
Different energy. Yeah.
It's relational. It's love. It's as opposed to, you don't need to understand why.
Yeah,
It's
like the reason that you smack your toddler's hand when they're sticking the fork in the outlet is not to try to enforce some kind of law. It is out of love.
Exactly.
Because you care about them. So the Ten Commandments is a relational aspect. I mean, it's barbaric to us now. Like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. But translate those in the time period that they were living in.
Yeah.
They're living a tribal life.
Yeah.
They're living.
Think of Papua New Guinea. Think of natives in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah. It's like it's a different world. They didn't have police officers that they had to like worry about. Like, this is a different time period.
Yeah.
You have to kind of dive yourself back into, okay, how were they living? What was their day-to-day like? It wasn't like here where we're at right now. So that's why it's kind of hard to like disassociate, and we kind of live in a world that is formed by laws. Like, that's kind of how our world is now. But for them, these were God saying, no, don't kill, like, don't steal, obey your parents, do these things. And it's the same thing as like why you tell your toddler, no, don't open the front door and run into the street. That's a bad thing. It's because I love you that I'm going to spank you right now, because I want you to associate that with don't do this.
Exactly.
And as the kid grows up, you know, the parent has to kind of tone it back a little bit. You know, like once I've always kind of seen like Christ coming in as like the 18th birthday of the Jewish people. Like, they finally kind of like, because where Jesus kind of comes in, he kind of flips their whole world upside down, and that's kind of how it is for a kid. When you turn 18, you kind of gain this, like, you're an adult now. You have to make these decisions for yourself. You're not living underneath your parents' roof anymore. And so, like, kind of go back a little bit, when the prophets are kind of like speaking for God, that's where God kind of like takes his little step back, like you would when your kid is 16. You know, you kind of take it, you're not spanking your 16-year-old anymore. At least I hope not. Like, that'd be, you just don't do that. You speak to them in different ways. You parent them differently. And that's kind of where I've always seen that time period of, like, if you look at the Jewish people's history, you know, God is there for quite a while, and then you can kind of see him toning back a little bit. And then you get the prophets. People are speaking kind of on the behalf of God. And that's closer to when we're kind of getting towards Jesus a little bit.
Yeah.
And so,
exactly. But let me finish with the Jews with the whole laws, okay? Because there wasn't just 10; there ended up being like 613 of these things, and then on top of that, it doesn't matter. And so he gives all these laws, okay? And what happened with the Jews, which would be Amelia, which would be a natural thing. Let's get back to her being our only child. You're the only one at home, okay? You know you have stepbrother, or you have brothers and sisters, okay? All kind. But mom and dad are spending all their time for you. What would she begin to think?
She's the favorite.
You got it. She would start thinking, I'm the favorite. I'm the chosen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the chosen people. Who does mom and dad spend their time with? It's me. And so the Jews begin to think that we are God's elect. We are his chosen people.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get it, that they're chosen for the sake of the world. We're chosen because God loves us more than you. And so what happens is they become exclusive. The very laws and rules that were helped to govern them and help them grow up to become a light to the world, they take it and become separate. They start thinking, if I relate to Jeremiah, I'll become unclean. Okay, and they separated themselves, and they started hating. They called them Gentile. If you're not a Jew, you're something else. There's only one tribe that God loves. It's the Jews, the Hebrews, the Israelites, whatever you want to call them. Okay, everyone else. Well, what's that one line? God will use the Gentiles as the logs to fan the flames in hell. That's what some of the Jews thought. God will use Gentiles as the logs to fan the flames in hell. I mean, that's radical, but that's the idea. It's just, and yet God, can you imagine when God is going? He's just going, oh no, I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. You know, where's it happened? All right.
Well, quick question.
Yeah.